Without Cody Rhodes, there would be no AEW. Whether you love him, hate him, or were indifferent to him, it is undeniable. From lighting the flame of All In to whatever the hell he was on about in most of his promos, Cody was at times the very lifeblood that kept AEW pumping. So, colour us all very surprised when Cody and wife Brodie Rhodes announced that they were leaving AEW, with rumours that Cody is about to traipse back into the waiting arms of WWE, the very company he spent the last 5 years trashing at every opportunity. For all intents and purposes, it seems as though this is the end of Cody Rhodes in AEW, so let's sit back, relax, shine up our neck tattoos, and reflect on the American Nightmare's finest moments in an AEW ring. Until it's revealed that he's worked us good and proper, that is, the dashing swine. I'm Adam Pachisi from Cultaholic Wrestling, and these are the 10 best Cody Rhodes triumphs in AEW. Join us. Number 10, Shaq. Cody wanted to be seen as AEW's MVP, no, not him, and if there was a mainstream crossover opportunity, then Cody would take it. From the Go Big Show and Rhodes to the Top to teaming with Snoop D-O-double-G, Cody wanted to be seen as Mr. AEW to the wider world. So when AEW managed to get Shaquille O'Neal to finally wrestle a proper match, there was only one man to stand across from him in the ring. The match itself was far better than it had any right to be, with Cody making Shaq look fantastic after taking a pitch-perfect powerbomb. Red Velvet and the debuting Jade Cargill played their parts as Shaq and Cody brawled, and it all ended when Cody splashed the NBA icon through 2 tables at ringside. Was it the best match ever? Hardly, but the best celebrity match ever? It's certainly a candidate, and Cody was the one pulling all the strings. Number 9, MALAKAI Black. In positioning himself as Mr. AEW, Cody inadvertently painted a huge target on his back for anyone entering the company, with a statement win over Rhodes enough to etch your name in the history books. So when MALAKAI Black appeared out of nowhere and sent Cody and Arn Anderson's jaws into space with a pair of black masses, it instantly put him on the map as one of AEW's greatest threats. When the two finally faced off in singles action, we all expected Cody to do his best Hulk Hogan and overcome the odds without breaking a sweat, but to his credit, he did the job, and then some. MALAKAI battered Cody to the point where Rhodes teased retirement, going so far as to leave his boots in the ring. And if it wasn't for Arn Anderson burning his clothes or threatening to shoot him in the head, yes, really, then it may have actually happened. Well, in kayfabe at least. Unfortunately, this story ended before it really got going, but for what it achieved in a short space of time, it truly delivered. Number 8, the pandemic. After Dynamite's successful debut in October 2019, AEW was starting to find their groove and build off that initial momentum when the COVID-19 pandemic threatened to put a stop to everything. Rather than shut down or retreat, AEW pressed on behind closed doors, with their first show of the new era set for March 18th, 2020 in Daly's Place. And who opened the show? Who else? With the lights down, Cody stood alone in the ring and spoke from the heart, reflecting on real-world events and the kayfabe struggles of the elite. He was eloquent, he was the grandson of a plumber, and there was no doubt that Cody was the de facto face of the company. Given how car crash Cody Rhodes was for the last 6 months of his AEW run, with his terrible rambling promos, weird isolated storylines, and possibly egotistic booking decisions, it almost seems odd to remember that he used to be the most popular star in the entire company, and it wasn't even close. Number 7, the man for the big moments. In WWE, the rule of thumb was that if there's something big and stupid to jump off of, then Shane McMahon was the man for the job. In AEW, it seemed like the man for the big spots was one Cody Rhodes. For starters, there was the first ever AEW cage match where Cody took on Wardlow, a good match that is remembered for Rhodes hitting a monstrous moonsault from the top onto Mr. Mayhem. Then, in a weird throwaway feud with Andrade, the two found themselves in a no DQ match for no reason at all, and Cody, being an absolute lunatic, decided that this was the perfect time to do a flaming table spot. He crushed Andrade with a reverse superplex, taking the brunt of the heat on his back. And then, during his final bow in the company, he took one of the most remarkable bumps in ladder match history when Sammy Guevara nailed him with the most perfect diving cutter you ever did see. Bloody show off. Number 6, tackling Le Champion. With Chris Jericho lording over AEW as its first world World Champion, Cody Rhodes stepped up as Le Champion's first major test, with the two signed on to go one-on-one for the gold at the inaugural Full Gear pay-per-view. As the fiery fighting babyface, Cody cut one of his greatest ever promos, claiming that he went from undesirable to ungoddamn deniable, and stated that if he didn't beat Jericho, then he would never challenge for the title again. Everyone thought that Cody had telegraphed the ending and that he would be stood at the top of the company he built with the belt held high. Things were going Cody's way too, and after Jake Hager was ejected from ringside, Rhodes crushed Jericho with the Crossroads in front of match judges Dean Malenko, Arn Anderson, and the Great Muta. But Jericho fought on, and soon Le Champion was back in it, locking in the Lion Tamer as Cody's protege MJF did his best Owen Hart impression. His throwing of the towel meant that Cody could never ever again challenge for the belt, and to Cody's credit, he never did. Number 5, the Trials of MJF. MJF costing Cody any shot at the AEW World Championship turned the cocky young Burberry-loving weasel into one of the biggest baddies in the business. Whilst MJF's potential as a heel was never in question, Cody was the perfect babyface foil to kick it off in AEW, with MJF and newly hired goon Wardlow out to make Cody's life a living hell. MJF decreed that Cody would have to adhere to a no-touching policy, defeat Wardlow in a cage match, and receive 10 lashes with a belt if he wanted a revenge match at Revolution 2020. Rhodes obliged, his whipping segment on February 5th a truly eye-watering affair. Again, we all assumed that after going through hell with MJF, Cody would come out on top. But again, he did the job, MJF continuing his undefeated streak with the help of his newly won Dynamite Diamond ring. Of course, MJF was humble in victory afterwards. Number 4, Throne Smasher. Wrestling works best when smothered in layers of symbolism, those gestures and images that say more than 1,000 words ever could. Heading into All Out, Cody had a statement to make, and on his way to the ring, he passed by a very familiar throne, one similar to Triple H's. Cody, naturally, twatted it with a sledgehammer to rapturous applause, as Hunter either quaked in his boots or chuckled loudly from his fortress of money and leather jackets. Cody's references to trips wouldn't stop there, and as the crowd started to turn on Rhodes, the references would change in significance. The sledgehammer would come out time and time again, as would a golden shovel. Then, despite never being a heel, Cody got booed out of the building when he first hooked MALAKAI Black's arms for a pedigree, only to drop a Tiger Driver 98 instead. We all thought that pedigree would inevitably come when Cody finally snapped and turned, but he was out of the door before it could happen. Number 3, Mr. Brodie Lee. Brodie Lee's arrival in AEW had wrestling fans excited because we finally knew Big Rig would be given the spotlight he so richly deserved. As the hulking head of the Dark Order, Brodie blazed a path of destruction during his time in AEW, with his biggest victory coming in the quick annihilation of Cody and the entire Nightmare family. In doing so, he became the second ever TNT Champion. Once again, Cody helped make Brodie a star by doing the job, even getting battered whilst on a stretcher. The rematch between the two was even greater, as Cody and Brodie channeled Greg Valentine and Roddy Piper to utterly paste each other in a good old-fashioned dog collar match. In victory, Cody became the first ever two-time TNT Champion and the second man to defeat Brodie in AEW, sending the Exalted One running for the hills. At the time, we weren't to know that this would be Brodie's last ever match, but the entire angle served as a perfect example of just how good a wrestler John Huber was. Number 2, the TNT Champion. With Cody unable to ever contend for the AEW World Championship, there was only one avenue for him to get his hands on some sweet, sweet singles gold. As the first ever TNT Champion, and to date the only ever 3-time holder of the belt, Cody elevated the title beyond the mid-card to become almost on the same level as the AEW World Championship. The first reign saw Cody take on literally everyone, from Warhorse and Ricky Starks to Eddie Kingston and Jungle Boy. Anyone who wanted a slice got a slice. After losing and regaining it from Brodie Lee, Cody did the job again for Darby Allin. So far, so good. Cody's third reign, though, we could have done without it, to be honest. We expected it to be the latest step towards Cody turning heel, but instead he missed a defense at Battle of the Belts, then made up for it in his final AEW match against Sammy Guevara at Beach Break 2022. Number 1, Cody versus Dustin. All we ever wanted in WWE was a significant singles clash between Cody and Dustin Rhodes, but Vince McMahon was against the idea, so we got a quick bout at Fastlane 2022 2015 and bugger all afterwards. Coming into All Out, Dustin was fresh out of WWE and Cody vowed to finally defeat his brother and kill the Attitude Era. The Rhodes boys truly left nothing on the line, with Dustin pissing buckets of blood and Cody even harking back to bloody Stardust of all things. Eventually, Cody reigned supreme, but the real story was the quality of the bout itself. The match was not only match of the night, but one of the matches of the entire year. With tears streaming down his face, Cody told Dustin that he was not allowed to retire and that he was set to face the Young Bucks in tag action. But he didn't need a tag partner, he needed his older brother, and the two embraced to a huge ovation. If Cody never ever steps foot in an AEW ring ever again, then this moment alone cemented his legacy.